We're going to begin again. I invite you to come to the sanctuary again and maybe a little bit closer to the front. We're going to begin again. Up, grab the coffee and the tea that you need, and let's make our way to the sanctuary. Make our way to the front. I invite you to come back into the sanctuary. Come closer to the front than you were. Okay, invite you, and if you can make your way a little bit closer, that'll give us a fuller feel. You know what? Can I meet from down here? There we go. I don't want to be as far away from you, so I'm coming down. Okay, let's get started. All right, we'll get started. Welcome, and it's really great to be with you again, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Is your microphone on?
It is on. Is it too, am I too far away from my mic?
You just tap it to see if okay, it's working.
Is it louder if I have it right here instead of on my jacket?
You got Betty there?
Is that better? Just a little bit better. I know somehow it's not that. Oh. Okay, we want to begin, and Greg, I wonder if you can, I can't manage the slides from up here, so let's move the slides a few forward. Our agenda for today is you've been in a time of discernment as a congregation, a time of prayer and reflection. What we'd like to do is think together a little bit and to listen for what did you hear. In terms of where we're headed today what we want to do is collect some of your perspectives of how you think the congregation is being called. We can do a bit of work with it to see what kind of work that you can do as a congregation to incarnate God's presence here in Elora, but also in Bethany. I want to remind us of our questions for discernment. Go forward a few slides. And one more.
Sorry, I'm doing 7 things at once here. You okay with that? What slide do you want?
The next one. Thank you. I want to remind us of the questions for discernment, and Greg, we're going to go through a couple of slides here in quick succession, so just so you know that. The first overarching question was remembering our strengths, challenges, questions, options, dreams, hopes, so remembering all those things we've talked about, while opening ourselves to God's direction. What is God calling Hope Springs to do? This was the large overarching question that we were exploring. And then we had 3 big sort of focus questions, and one of them was, we long for deeper encounters with God's presence. How do we nurture this? How do we become more comfortable sharing our experiences of faith? The second one was, how do we deepen our ability to be an intergenerational community of belonging for all sorts of people? How do we continue fostering our gentle spirit with one another? And that word gentle spirit was one of the things that we shared back with you as a theme that emerged out of the focus group conversations. And it was this word gentle spirit, or these two words together, really spoke. They really said something about who Hope Springs is. And then the third question was, what needs in our communities is God calling us to see? How do we share and show God's love, mercy, and justice beyond Hope Springs? And then there was a fourth question. And the fourth question on the next slide was, and then. If we could answer those first three, the big question, the first three other sub-questions, then there's a practical question, which is, how can we use our resources creatively? That includes building, property, and finance. And how can we support and sustain our paid staff and volunteers to support God's call to Hope Springs? Those are the questions that we want to explore together today. But first, I want to say a word about current reality, which you're obviously aware of. If we can go 2 slides forward, Greg. 2 slides forward, and what you'll see is a question. One more. Can you see the green there? Not really well, eh? Nonetheless, I can read it for you. On September 10th, as you know, Greg announced the conclusion of his ministry here as of December 31st of this year. So our conversation about listening for God's leading for Hope Springs takes into consideration the fact that Greg, who's been the pastor at 2 of the 3 congregations for the last 15 years, but then together with his collective congregation for 1 year, that his term with you is ending at the end of December, and so our conversation wants to take that into consideration. And I want to just make space before we move into our discernment conversation. Is there anything that you want to offer in terms of questions that you have or reflections that you have around the timing of us doing this work and Greg's departure at the end of this year? Maybe I want to honor, I want to say just a few words about Greg's departure. One of them is that whenever a minister leaves a congregation, there's a hard transition with that. Last night, for example, I was at a big party in my congregation honoring the pastor whose last Sunday is today. And there's joy in honoring his ministry that was, and there's also sadness about saying a goodbye to someone who was a beloved pastor for the last 8 years. And so I want to acknowledge that when a minister leaves a congregation, there are complex feelings of both wanting to honor somebody. There's also grief. And one of the things I encourage congregations to do is to make time for grief. Often, like yesterday in my own congregation, it was a coffee house. He's a singer. So there was people singing and performing and making jokes. It was a lot of fun. But there's also a story of grief that accompanies every departure. So I encourage you to honor the grief of saying goodbye to Greg's ministry here among you when that happens. And I also want to say that in terms of this process, the discernment that you're engaging in a way that, with much respect to Greg, the timing of this allows you to have to think ahead for Hope Springs. And how does Hope Springs want to be thinking about its ministry complement? What kind of minister you're looking for the future. So when you discern now, partly what you're discerning for is what kind of clergy, what kind of a presence do you want to be in the community, and what role do you want this minister to play? That's kind of a question that you can keep in mind as we engage in this next steps. Am I making sense? Yeah, okay. All right. Then just going a few slides forward, Greg. I just want to remind us of an image that I shared with you. There we go. An image that I shared with you a couple of times ago already since I was here. This notion of the spirituality of transformation. There are these 3 stations in the spiritual life: awe and wonder, suffering and surrender, and transformation. And as we age and we become more spiritually mature, we are able to stand in all 3 of these stations at the same time, where we experience awe, we experience suffering, and we experience transformation at the same time. And when we think about the journey that you've been on as a congregation, the wilderness journey is often that journey of surrender, of letting go, and you have all let go a fair bit prior to becoming Hope Springs. And that surrender is opening itself up to transformation. One of the things that I've said in the past is that in the Bible, whenever you see the word desert or wilderness, It's like a little flag going up, and it says, what it means is that transformation is about to happen. So if you think of all the wilderness stories, all the desert stories, and in a way, the journey that led you into this time, into becoming Hope Springs, there's a wilderness feel to that. And in a way, the discernment we've been in is also a bit of a wilderness. We intentionally enter the wilderness. Jesus intentionally would go to the wilderness in order to understand how he needed to be transformed. That's part of the spiritual life. Okay, so what I'd like to do is take us forward a few slides then. And Greg, this is a slide that says Season of Prayer Reflection. Go forward a few slides, keep going. Well, let me just say a word about this one then. When we think about discernment versus decision making, we are not making decisions here today, but when you think about when you pay attention to Hope Springs and who Hope Springs is, gauge discernment, we might ask, what insights are others hearing? How do we hold our views lightly to make rhythms of the spiritual life? Maybe not to your spouse, but my question to you is being invited to be in prayer and brings but in your heart and mind. So we're not going to be in small groups. It's 5, let's say 7.
I leave it with them.
Okay.
And I'll take the recording,
Yeah.
which will make it. Going one more. For just a moment. The short version is Spirit. How do we station you've been having and to sit those of you station. So
Just another 2 or 3 minutes, just a few more minutes.
I was at the other end on the internet, so now I've come on. So I missed whatever you wrote.
Oh, I
before.
didn't write anything yet.
Oh, so this is new.
This is new. Oh yeah, no, this is.
In the group, I was with the people at the Heritage River Retirement Community. Well, because they had refreshments, I did. We had the questions in front of us, so I ate just whatever I could. So I'll send that to you. I'll type it up and send it to you. Well, you can see it's not very much, but
Yeah, but you might also find time to share it with the whole group.
here.
Yeah, because I'll be taking people's comments momentarily. Thank you for doing that. Okay, I'm going to invite you just to begin wrapping up. In 1 minute, we will collect as a large group. No, I said you had a minute, so you're all perfectly on time. Okay, I invite you to, those of you who are still in small group conversation, I invite you to wrap up your conversations and focus your attention this way. There was lots of good and engaged conversation around the congregation. What I'd like to do is what we want to do is hear from you. And I've got a flip chart here, and I'm going to be collecting notes that I'll be typing up and we'll be working with as the reference group to sort of discern from here. But let's start with the group that was in this corner over here. You're all invited to speak, but can somebody from your group share a key idea or reflection or insight emerging for you in response to one of our big questions over here? That's okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would say in general we had a whole...
Can't hear?
We actually might not, because otherwise our friends online will.
Okay. So does that mean they should come to the pulpit? Laura, this is your opportunity to be at the pulpit.
Oh, hello everyone. I would say our group had some honest conversations about how Greg's departure is affecting us and how we are uncertain about how to move forward without him. What does our new leader look like? How does that process even work? Are we ready for someone new? There were no answers to any of those questions, just a lot of thoughts about that, feelings. Yeah, I noticed you don't have anything to write down yet. Okay. I think one of the other big concepts we were talking about was the whole idea of outreach and how we really feel that that's important. I think our church as a whole feels that's important. And to not get caught up in, okay, we don't have ourselves figured out, so we can't reach out. Because there is a lot of value in reaching out and reaching in, and how we get back from other parts of the community. We really feel like we can do both. It's a balance of that.
And did you have any concrete ideas about what outreach could look like?
Well, I mean, we did talk about the ones that we have currently used in the past, which is the fish fry and the back bacon on a bun. That's not the right way to say it, sorry. How I think we would go ahead with those and continue them because they're traditions for us. We're not even thinking about how COVID might affect that food prep. Yeah, I think that was probably the only concrete.
Anything else from this group? Thank you, Laura. Anything else from this group that you'd like to offer? Right. So how to continue this tradition and recognizing that the community is growing, right? Is that right? And one of the things I'd like to say about Greg's departure, in the old days, the United Church would have asked you, when a minister leaves, to do something called a JNAC, or Joint Needs Assessment. And that some of the outcomes of that assessment would help you to figure out what kind of a minister you're looking for. And in a way, this process can do some of that for you as well. That as you think about where are you being called as a congregation, that can really help you form an idea of who that next person is that you need to be. So it's never a good time to lose a minister, but in a way, there's some logic to at least using the outcomes of this process to determine, to think a little bit ahead to what that person could, what would help this community to thrive. There was a group over here. Who from that group would like to come to the pulpit to share out of your... You're coming together? Nice. Nice.
Yes, so we also voiced our concern about Greg leaving and how that is going to look and things like that. Alma has kind of gone through it, so we are somewhat familiar with the process, other than I'm told it's changed again. So yeah, we were kind of wondering if the process would also help kind of bring us all together again, because it's something that we're going to have to do as a congregation, and that could be interesting to see what kind of needs come out of that.
And also the fact that Elora has not gone through this process, whereas Alma has done it a few times. And it is there's a lot of grief associated with it, there's a lot of pullback associated with it, but it's also something to not be afraid of, I guess. Is that?
Yes, it hopefully becomes a point of growth that we can do and proceed forward with it.
But
So,
keep positive about it.
Yes, and the fact that Greg is able to kind of write his own ticket as to what his job looks like, I think is an awesome opportunity for him.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I applaud what he's doing, and I think it's great that he gets the chance to do that. So we just have to deal with the outcome.
Right, absolutely. And did your conversation take you at all into some concrete ways in which you experienced the congregation being called?
We were also talking about the outreach aspect of it, and one of the things that is happening now is the mobile food rescue, And I think that's a great opportunity that is happening in the church, and hopefully we can be more involved in it and find a need. And that is the key, I guess, finding the needs in the community and help work with those needs.
And people like to serve. We know that there's people from Alma that would only come out when they can serve, when they can help at the Elmira Syrup Festival, or they would be able to put together flowers in memory of a congregation who's passed, a member who's passed. But if you give people a job, if you tell them, well, come out and we're going to do this, and would you please bring, where's Steve, cookies? And he baked twice for cookies. So it's just a matter of recognizing the fact that people like to be able to give and that's their outreach in the community, in a faith community. And as what Robert was saying is that there was the Food Secure event in our sanctuary garden, and in the future, when the weather is inclement, opening up the church for them to be able to do that, and also having an opportunity to express that. We have a youth group. We have opportunities for you to be able to come in and welcome them into the church, but also treating them as equals and acceptance of no matter from where they are. So that just...
It's helpful. Thank you. I want to make sure in the interest of time, we're going to ask the next group.
Yep.
So thank you. The group that was back there.
My first time up here. So we also expressed concern about Greg leaving, obviously. But I guess our group kind of focused more on like the congregation itself. So one of the things that we thought of is maybe come like January when Greg's gone, is that a time for like us to share our stories before we have a minister in place?
Your faith stories, you mean? Or?
Yeah, like kind of, our walks with God, our walks with, faith. Just because we were talking about like how some of us don't like necessarily feel like we have a deep connection always, or how we hear that connection. But we had mentioned that sometimes we find that connection through hearing other people's stories, and could that be an opportunity for us to do that? That was Barb's idea, but... and then another thing we talked about, just more something to think about, is the fact that we kind of have like, no, I don't want to say three separate entities, but like there's the people in the building, and then the people that worship online, and the people that worship in Heritage River, and how do we like be one community with those three different, I don't know what you call it, but you know what I mean, right? Yeah, so did I cover everything? The meat of what we talked about? Am I missing anything? Like, which? Yeah.
And did you have concrete ideas about how to use the building? But you want to raise that as a key?
Yeah, unless you want me to say what you said, Bonnie, but I'm assuming not.
Did you have a concrete idea?
No, she just made a joke.
Okay. All right, the building. I'll just make a note of the building. Okay. I want to make sure that we hear from all the groups, and there is a group right in here. Wow, this is good. Quartet, that's right.
Okay. What's happened here is that Becky has agreed to speak reluctantly, and the rest of us are her groupies. So there you go.
Rudy. Okay.
Go, Becky.
We're aiming for, what, 2?
2, yeah. 2.
Yeah,
Ish.
number 2. And then we talked about both how Alma has done this before, so we can kind of share our ideas on how it went, because we have had long ministers and then had to do the minister thing again a few times. And then we talked about community, how to build community things within our congregation, because we don't necessarily know all those things about people, like asking for, like Debbie had said, asking for them to make something or asking for them to do that. We don't actually know that about people, what they like to do, what their gifts are. Yeah. So, and in connection with that, I said doing something, pardon? Communication, yes. The difference of how to tell everybody about everything happening, because some of the ones that came from Elmwood here don't have internet, so they don't get those. So maybe it's saying it more often out loud when you're here on Sunday, or having a phone, like somebody phones to different people and you have a chat or something and you get to know people. And I said about the Acorn, the youth group thing. What's the Acorn? It's called the Campfire Acorns and Oaks. Acorns and Oaks. So that was like the youth group had to ask somebody older in the congregation to go to the campfire, and then we talked and stuff. But I wonder if there's an expansion to that to do in the congregation to
do an
pair somebody
intergenerational?
up, pair somebody up, a younger, older, and you get to know them that way, and then you share or something. I don't know.
And I think part of it was that we don't know who we're missing.
Yeah.
We know that there are people within this group that, I know that Becky makes butter tarts and, things that happen like that. But there are lots of people who may have just stepped back because it's a little more complicated for them to hear what's going on at church without having, as Becky said, lots of people don't have internet, and I'm afraid we might be missing them. What am I doing talking?
You're doing great.
Wonderful job. Yeah, that said.
You're a born leader, Leslie. Okay.
What just happened here?
I think that's it.
That's it.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. There was a group of 3, I think, right up here. Did you get nominated?
They're sitting down there. Yeah. Raucous. We need to be raucous in this church.
Okay, be raucous.
Is that? Did you write that down?
I'm writing it down. Yeah, I'm writing it down.
So, as well as thinking about Greg's departure, we were also thinking about Barb's departure. So we were thinking about the impact on that on ministry to youth and young people. We were talking about a kind of burnout among young families, a kind of stress that people are feeling, and yet a sense that the strong youth culture we've had and still have, and struggling around burnout a little bit, but that is a fruitful opportunity for new life and growth in our congregation. So if we're serious about that, how do we do that? So one of the ideas is sometimes maybe some people who don't have kids should run some of the kids ministry so that parents can get a break from their kids and get fed by the preaching happening in the worship. And because sometimes if they're stressed out, they might just stay at home because they know they have to run the program. So thoughts like that. Like, what if we did a social event where young families can hang out and get to know each other and actually make friends while other people run a kids program so they don't have to get a babysitter and they can actually be adults together for a change. So how do we take some of the weight off a demographic that we'd like to see grow? so they feel seen and loved and cared for. So that's what I'm thinking. We also thought, a few thoughts about the building. We thought, wow, there's been a little less energy this fall compared to last spring. We were a little dismayed, trying not to be disheartened about that. But lots of opportunities too, right? So, but maybe the structure of the pews makes us feel less of a cohesive group because people like to sit at the back. Hi, that's okay. I'm just, pointing that, whatever. Not to make anyone feel bad, but it's just the structure of the space, right? So how do we think about that to maybe have a more flexible room? Maybe we can be semicircle, maybe we can be cozier, so with a smaller number, we still feel awesome and linked and united rather than dispersed and alienated. Yeah, it's controversial. Some people will clap, some people will scowl. But I'm saying it. And then maybe we could have rental groups that can use the church in different ways because we have a more flexible setup. Because weddings like an aisle down the middle, we don't have one. Well, we got an aisle in the middle, so whatever. What am I forgetting? There's a couple good romps.
We talked a bit about the culture of our service, which we love, the formal vibe.
Yes. So instead of people smuggling in their coffee and feeling like it's a relaxed place, but it's a formal place, what do we do? Like maybe we want to send a message so that people can feel, after COVID people sat on their couches, did church on their couch with their coffee. And so now the space feels a little different than it used to. Can we bring how do we feel hospitality in here, even in how we lay out the space? We could probably think about it differently. And maybe this coffee at the back, many of us are excited about it. I personally am thrilled with butter tarts. But you don't have to make the scary move to the fellowship hall where if you're new, you feel like you're making a new commitment to go down the stairs. So that's a possibility. I want to say this. Okay, so, and this isn't just me talking. This is like, they were like on fire. So it's tricky for us to know even what the gospel is for us as a somewhat, kind of orthodox but kind of liberal church. What do you do with that? Jesus, incarnation, scripture, but kind of liberal at the same time. So I don't know, thinking about that I think is important. How do we communicate that? And part of my question was, can we have an event every so often that we feel like we can invite people to that is going to be an easy event to invite people to? Like maybe it's just straight up community good fun. Maybe a fundraiser meal doesn't do it because that doesn't really say that much about who we are, and it's just about making some money and whatever. There's community spin-offs, they're great, I love them, but it's not what I'm thinking of. I'm trying to think of something that would be like, hey, here's this really cool thing we're doing, and it's safe entry, and you meet some of us, and what would those be? And can we be strategic about planning those like several times a year, like we do something that maybe addresses different groups. One thing that I lament, and do we have the energy to do this anymore? But what am I trying to say? Kids camp in the summer. So COVID messed that up. How do we have the workforce to run such a thing? Maybe we'd have to rethink it. But what does it do? It invites a gazillion kids into this space with their families, and it has a ripple effect of how we're known in the community. It's a huge welcome. It meets the needs of families that daycare, how do you afford all these things in the summer, you got to work. Like, it meets this community need, and we were kind of famous for it because Barb is awesome. And so anyway, we should do it. But I don't know. That's it.
All right. Rock is Phil. Okay, and I'm going to beg forgiveness because we said we'd finish at 12:30, but we need to hear from 3 more groups. So I'm going to ask for your permission to go over by 10 minutes. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. This group over here, I think that Chris was in.
I really didn't want to come up here by myself.
Don't worry, you are not alone.
All right, we're not alone. We are not alone. Well, one of the first things that we talked about was that we thought we would like to go right back to the very beginning in Genesis and just make a small suggestion to God, and that would be that we would like more than 24 hours in a day. Want to talk a little bit about that 24 hours in a day?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
your
Yes,
turn.
yeah. So that's a little bit funny, but as you notice, we are one of the young families, and the social structures. You know how busy life is. We basically work out of town. We are out there, and the day kind of becomes a little bit small to do anything after your regular routines. And then the idea whole was coming out from, I think they mentioned about outreach. What can we do in the community? But then, do we have people who can actually get that time to do anything out of their regular routine? And that's where that conversation was going. But more so the outreach. How do we show our church in the community that we are doing this? I like what Phil was saying. Are we attracting, or are we helping the community in the needs they have, like the camp in the summer or the social event? I participated in the dinner before the COVID. That was fundraising, but I don't think there was anything says anything about the church that was going on there. It was just a dinner, just regular, yeah. But how do we show that this church is doing something? It's not just a building standing there, people comes in and they go, right? That's where we're going. I don't know if I have something else.
Maybe just two more things that we added on that. When we talked about, we do get busy, well, what are some things that we can be doing? And I think this talks to sharing our faith stories. How can we be taking Hope Springs out into the community? So even though we're here on Sunday mornings, what can we be doing in those 24 hours that's also sharing God's love out in the places that we are? What does that look like? The other thing, there was something else in there. Where was I going with that? You know exactly where I was going with that, right? Yeah. Come on, we're a team here. Like there was something else that was there too. Kurt, what else?
I think we're talking about looking at the needs in the community as well.
Right, just figuring out just what those needs are, and somebody else has already expressed that in their group. Authenticity, perfect.
Did everybody hear that? Okay, just because of the mic. So what I wrote down for your group is to show the church and the community by meeting the community's needs. The fundraiser doesn't really show the church enough. I think that's what I heard, right? Go.
That would show up.
That show you off a bit more in a good way. Take Hope Springs to the community and the community's needs and share with each other what is going on in the 24/7 of our lives so that we can be supportive of one another and be authentic and minister to our abilities or to our limits in a way is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and
serve to our limits.
allow people to show up.
And allow people to show up.
Right? We've heard the word serve a few times, I think that came up.
And one thing, just in conclusion to this group too, we talked about what do we want the community to look at Hope Springs and say about Hope Springs, and we hope that the community looks at us and says, Hope Springs.
Nice. Okay, there was a group back? Is there one or two more groups that we're missing? Okay.
Okay. So this phenomenon happens where you realize you're going to be one of the last groups called up, and you're thinking the whole time, what am I going to say when I get up here? So thank you for joining me. So I'll start kind of with the location that we're coming from. So we're coming from as well a perspective of the young families and how do we get the young families into the church, because they're legit the future of Hope Springs. So we were focusing on that call. How can we bring that back into our church? I remember when we first came here and Mary was really little, the front pew would be filled with kids. There'd be kids on the floor for children's worship time. Before we went downstairs, we had enough leaders and kids to run 3 classes. There was the youth group, all that good stuff. So I guess with that kind of came this idea, how are we being creative moving forward? How are we bringing that energy out in our services and into the community? There's a really important person that helps coordinate all of us, and that's Barb. And so how do we foster that youth minister? That's an important paid position, because we have a hard time just getting the volunteer, and that's above and beyond what anybody would volunteer for. So those are kinds of the conversations we had. We have a couple of youth up here. And in those conversations that I've been in with the youth, but also today, there's 2 really important things that come up. So one is snack, but 2 is also being very welcoming. And part of our conversation today reminded me of that, because in the welcoming piece, there's a justice element that comes along with that. So we were talking about the dilemma that people face when they're coming to a United Church, knowing our participation in the residential school system. There's acknowledgement of the history with LGBTQ2S+ community and welcoming them into the space. So those are all things that we're feeling Hope Springs is being called to do, and so how are we going to do that? We didn't quite get there beyond the sort of creative and the energy and the modernization, I guess you could say.
I want to make sure that I've not missed anything. You said, yes, invest in youth and young adult, or youth and children's ministry. I have invest in a youth ministry position, invest in snack, and be very welcoming and with a focus on justice.
Yes.
Would those be the 3 concrete outcomes, or did I miss
Those be
anything?
The 3 concrete outcomes? Sure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody from this, well, let me just, where we've been so far, you've talked about outreach, recognizing that a search can bring you together, use the January to time plus post-January after Greg leaves to allow people to share faith stories as part of your journey to get to know each other better and to deepen the sort of in-reach in a way instead of outreach. Act to bring the in-person, the online, and the heritage community together. There was some conversation with the building. We didn't get anything really concrete about that except later, which that's coming. Build the internal community, learn about people's gifts, like who makes the best tarts. Enhance communication channels that outside of the internet so that there's other ways that people learn. Create intergenerational conversation pairs. Be raucous. Those without kids to lead kids programs, or find maybe a social event for young families to get to know one another and offer childcare so that they get a bit of a break. Do something with the pews, do something with the structure of the building internally so that it can be more flexible. That would help with rentals, but it also could make you connect a little more easily. I want to give you I don't know if I told you the story before, but I once worked with a congregation whose sanctuary was smaller than yours, and they had at one point been 200 people, they were down to 40, and they sort of sat, 1 or 2 people per pew, and then they couldn't afford to heat their sanctuary in the winter, so they moved to the basement. And there was a young woman in the congregation who had a daughter who was about 4, and when it was time to move back upstairs, she said, and I was doing this kind of process with them, she said, my daughter, because they always sat in the back, used to draw the backs of people's heads. But when we sat downstairs, we sat in a circle, and now she draws faces. She said, I'm okay with moving upstairs again, but I want my daughter to be able to draw faces, not backs of heads. What do we need to do differently in our sanctuary so that my daughter will draw faces? And I think that's kind of the energy that this group was talking about, right? How do you create a kind of a worship and a climate in the sanctuary that allows people to draw faces, to see faces, and to connect with one another? Communicate our fuel hospitality in the sanctuary, like having the coffee hour upstairs, inviting people to bring their coffee to their seats. Communicate our theological stance, I think is what I heard in your comment from this group. Have events that are easy to invite people to. The kids camp in the summer. Just an example of that, congregation that I know, they would have a sermon they had a 3-week sermon series once a year that riffed off a movie, and they would show a movie clip and then the minister would riff off that in order for the sermon, because that became a really easy way to invite people to come to church on that Sunday, because it was going to be a sermon that would be accessible to someone who wasn't familiar with church. That's an example of that. Show church in the community by meeting its needs. Take Hope Springs to the community, share with each other what is going on in the 24/7 of our lives so that we can be authentic here. We can also serve as we're able and also bless those who can do what we can't. Invest in the youth ministry position, invest in SNAC, and be very welcoming and including the commitment to justice. Is there anything that we're missing that you think we need to add? Go ahead, there's 2 hands or 3, go ahead. More music. Uh-huh. Okay. Sorry, now music nights or in the sanctuary, right? Both Sunday and... Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and Deb, did you have your hand up? No. You were just waving. Okay. Was there another hand anywhere? Anything you wanted to add that we're missing? Over here, yeah.
At Prayer River, our conversation was a little bit more focused on worship itself, because everyone comes there to worship. And they were a little more inwardly focused. They said they found the worship helps them focus again as God's people. So when they were in worship, they talked about how they felt that they were God's representatives on earth, and that helped them keep their focus to be godly to others within the building through the week. And there's a couple others that I'll send you. But that was a different aspect.
Sure. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Let me ask just one more question before we close. Is there anything that you heard here today that surprised you or that sort of sparks your imagination? Just anybody. Anything that you heard here today in terms of these 3 pages that surprised you or that really sparks your imagination? Go ahead, Laura.
I like the idea of people sharing their faith stories.
Uh-huh.
I think the 3 things that jumped out at me were all about that whole piece of getting to know each other better.
Uh-huh.
And I'm using the word inventory of people's strengths and interests,
Mm-hmm.
so that
Mm-hmm.
we can group people or we can access those. And the other thing was the acorns and oaks thing. If that was an ongoing, you have a mentor-mentee, or you have it doesn't have to be just an older and a younger person. It could just be you have a buddy who's your congregational buddy.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
Something that makes me think of, so even this format of us sharing in the space, right, and it connects back to the physical space, because it's not going to be a small group conversation, but what does the format of our worship look like going forward in terms of, if you think about educational strategies and other things, it's often time for people to discuss something in small groups, and maybe that's part of the service where we're connecting together in smaller groups for part of the conversation.
Like on a regular basis.
On a regular basis, like this, but in worship, when you're discussing something, right? I think we were saying in our church, it just feels good to talk to other people. And if you're sharing faith stories, not everyone is comfortable going up to the front to share a faith story, but most of us are comfortable in a small group
Mhm.
Are there opportunities to share, small
Mhm.
groups, that sort of thing,
Mhm.
in the, you know, in the worship service?
Mhm. It's helpful. One more, two more comments from here. First from you and then from you, sorry.
The other thing that I was thinking as you were talking, when you said time in between finding a new minister and staying with it, I enjoyed the time in between when we were looking for minister before because we would get different guest speakers or we had theme days, like we had to bring your tractor to church that day, like fun theme days and stuff that were like out of the ordinary
Mhm.
stuff, but it brought more energy to everybody who was in it. Yeah, you can't do that here. You can't do that.
Okay.
Well, we pull this somewhere else and we can do it.
That's true.
And
You're right.
you can invite kids, like we could say, hey, let's see tractors, we're gonna have 3, 5 tractors at church, and people can bring their friends.
Yeah. So like we
But
did.
they also, some churches do blessing of the bicycles. Right? So in the spring, everyone brings their bikes, and oh, I love your bike, and blah, 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 and you're out in the street, and people walking by say, what's going on? And say, well, you got a bike, we'll bless it right now. And then you can that's,
Yeah. Okay, over here.
Speaking to the possible, one of my courses practices in St. James in water, and they don't have benches in their sanctuary and group practice in their sanctuary. And it's got they got 4 or 5 rows of seats, individual seats. They can be hooked together or not. They don't like to put them together. But that's just in front of the sanctuary. In the back, they have a series of tables, round tables that will fit about 8 of the same chairs around them. And I've never been there on Sunday, but I think that situation is what they worship.
Taking that a little bit farther, perhaps, we are looking for a new minister, maybe we talk about some things such as, the first part of the service is what we might call the sermon, which leads into our discussion.
Mhm. Mhm.
If we had the right setup here, maybe quite lovely.
Yeah. You know, my own congregation has children's Sunday school, but it also has adult education hour. And we have 2 services, and then the adult education hour is in between. And the services have different styles. But the advantage of that is exactly what you're describing, is people just chatting with each other on a variety of topics related to what it means. Sometimes the topics are about, you know, expressions of faith, but sometimes it's about how to support people when they're dying. Like those kind, like, so there's a real variety of things that happen, but it's exactly, and you meet people differently because I just am talking to the person who's sitting next to me who maybe I didn't talk to before. And so it changes the dynamic of the congregations because you're crisscrossing in different ways. Yeah. Okay. If you have anything else that you maybe think about after this morning that you want to add, you can talk to Chris, you can talk to Phil, you can talk to Deb, you can talk to Greg. They are all part of the reference group. We are meeting on Tuesday night. Am I right about that? This week. And so you can let them know and they will bring that to our conversation and we will be continuing the discernment and there will be you'll hear from us again, but we are going to be taking everything that we've heard today and anything that you add and begin to crafting a sense of direction for the congregation. So thank you for your participation today. It really was a joy to be here with you and to have this lively conversation with you, raucous at times, in fact, and I'm counting on more raucousness as we move forward, but thank you and blessings for you on this day.